was also trying to get in on some of the answers. So it was just a crazy big hot mess, the first hot mess of the pandemic. But then what they ended up doing was after all that, they put the procurement where it was supposed to go, which was Homeland Security and the Office of Civil Defense. And they kind of have experience doing this kind of thing because they do procurement. I don't know how much procurement they did over at the bank, but from the looks of it, not very much, according to this audit. And let's go in with the public auditor. But yeah, this was a hot one, BJ.
Thank you, and I thank my staff for their perseverance in pushing this through. They've been collecting all the data for a while, and then trying to do this remotely was really difficult, and then trying to make sure that we provided everybody the opportunity to respond. I mean, sometimes it would take weeks and actually months for some documents to get to us, and we still did not feel that the procurement record was complete in any of the procurements. Though they, in the second and third procurement, they were able to address the issue of conflict and, as you put it, put the responsibility where the responsibility ought to be. They still did not, Homeland Security still did not keep a complete procurement record. And that was part of the problem, is that using this emergency procurement, people get lax in what they're collecting and what they're doing. And so that was the reason why we had to point that out. It was an unprecedented time, and the administration should get credit for listening. Actually, I was surprised when we went through the emails and discovered that the administration was aware that this COVID problem could or should be addressed, and as far back as January, had tasked Homeland Security with going out and getting ready to get hotels. But January and February passed, and most of March passed, when the flight from the Philippines was coming in, and they needed hotels right away. And fortunately or unfortunately, the one person the governor could turn to was her legal counsel, and was able to get it done, though with issues. And so we just have to point out the issues, and we hope that everybody's learned from the misjudgments and the mistakes. The legislature is starting to address it. They realize that 30 days is too short with some of these pandemics or these disasters. They've changed the law to make it, I believe it's 90 days now that you can have declare an emergency. And those issues that we pointed out in the early procurements have been addressed. Exceeding the 30-day limits have been addressed, but procurement record still has not been done. There's been no analytics. No one has sat down and tried to figure out how many rooms do we really need. And so I'm hoping that this will start a discussion, and after discussion to try to figure out, start planning ahead. And I keep wanting to point out that it's been 16 months now, 17 months. You cannot continue to use the emergency, and I use air quotes, as a basis for continued emergency procurement. You've had sufficient time. I mean, I like I don't know, I'll misquote it now, the Guam Supreme Court, when it issued its decision on the governor's emergency powers. It says, yes, the governor has emergency powers, and the Constitution can take a short break, but only for a while because the Constitution does not go on sabbatical. And so they're acting like it's gone on sabbatical with procurement, and they really shouldn't be. And so we'd like to get it back on track, and so that we can use this money properly. We have a second audit going, starting from this one, because at the SES, I discovered that they had spent $48 million, or at least that's what was reported, on hotels and accommodations. And so we're going to break that down and do a study, an audit on that, and how all that money was spent, and whether or not you needed to keep 5 different hotels. And so that audit has now started and is ongoing.
So is it the audit when we're talking about the like the PacStar, right? So is it bad or is it justified? Because when I read the audit, it seemed like it was pretty egregious. But when I hear you explain it, you say things like, "Oh, well, it was unprecedented, and we got to give the administration credit."
Well, judging from the time and what happened in March, if they had gone through and followed what they were doing in January, there would have been, you wouldn't have had this problem. It was unfortunate that the ball was dropped and it had to be picked up so late in March. And when it was done in March, the person had conflict, and the hotels that responded were the hotels, and one of the hotels was the conflicted hotel, and that was unfortunate, but it was necessary at the time. It was needed, but had it been done properly from January, someone else could have procured that same hotel without the conflict, and there wouldn't have been this issue.
Can you kind of just clarify then, does the Emergency Health Powers Act give the governor authority or these special powers to do, I guess, whatever they did with the procurement of the quarantine and ISOFAX? Because I remember back then it was like, oh, well, you can bypass procurement laws. We could do this under emergency purchases.
The fact that they allowed it to lapse from January to March, and they needed to do something. One could argue that in March there wasn't 2020. There wasn't need for emergency procurement because someone had messed up the start of the January procurement.
Yeah.
But after that first one in our audit, we point out after May there should have been no need to continue to do emergency. Mm-hmm. You've had sufficient time. You could have used the time to go out and do the invitations or the requests, an RFP or an IFP, whichever one you felt you needed to do, but there was no need to continue to do the emergencies. And then to use the emergency, again, and I use air quotes, to justify all kinds of procurement. I mean, it just, of other kinds of things. We were all shocked with the number of procurements that $28 million listing that everybody was concerned about. Properly done, that you wouldn't have had that problem, and you wouldn't have had the issues of who was the one that was getting the contracts and how those things were done. And so we felt that since May of last year, the administration could have and should have been using the regular procurement process for everything that they were doing, because they've had some time. Even if we gave them the benefit of the doubt of the emergency in March, by May, that need was not there. You've had time to be able to do a regular procurement. You've had time to, you would have had time to go out and do the invitations to bid, and it should not continue through 2021 to be able to keep using it as an excuse. The emergency procurement for all kinds of things that even weren't related to the.
Well, I just wanted to ask if your audit determined that the Office of the Governor didn't comply with local procurement law, including deficiencies like improper procuring authority, conflict of interest, incomplete procurement record, and contract issues. Are these like actionable items that could be forwarded to the Attorney General? I mean, is there well, in your audit it says that they didn't comply with local procurement law. Does that mean that the law was broken, and is there something that the AG could pursue with this, or is it kind of like no one wants to touch this one because it's the governor's son-in-law?
Well, fortunately, the AG and I don't agree on this. And if you read the financial audits, and I think I mentioned it when the financial audit for the GovBond came out, and there was that one they had that one finding about, for the COVID hotels the auditors couldn't look at. I mean, looked at it and said there were no analytics were done, and procurement wasn't followed. But unfortunately, the administration is going on they got advice from I guess they're saying they had advice from the Attorney General that said they could. I don't know.
Yeah, because in that oversight hearing, the AG was with I can't remember her name.
She kept saying she couldn't answer because of attorney-client privilege. Yeah. I remember that.
And so there may have been advice there, and so we're just pointing it out that at least from our reading, that and some ways may say that it is too strict a reading of the procurement law, but no, we're just reading the procurement law just as we see it. And again, as I pointed out, even the Supreme Court, when acknowledging the powers of the governor, said, I mean, the laws can be avoided for a short period, but it's not going to go on sabbatical and be forever away for a year and some. So we've got to learn from it and plan better.
So you know how they always, you hear these things where like different agencies and they'll say something like, oh, we forwarded the findings to the AG's office for like with the Jack Hattig land trust forgery thing. Are you forwarding this audit to the AG's office? Because if you say there's actionable items here that could lead to prosecution and the procurement law was broken, in your opinion, yes or no, do you think that this is something that
we found questionable costs of that whole first of that whole procurement in March, and so we listed all the amounts there as question costs. I don't think it's something that I don't know. I don't hesitate to speak for the Attorney General. I don't think they will be doing anything about this, but we just wanted to point it out because we've got to point it out that from the audit perspective that it's our finding, and I think we were we were bolstered by the finding of the external auditor in the financial audit that said that they had issues with this, but the administration is claiming that on the advice of counsel, so you can't ding them on it if they're claiming it's under color of
Convenient.
advice from their
I mean, I only ask because you were a judge. I know you're not trying to speak for the AG, but I just assume you would maybe have a pretty legit opinion on whether or not someone could be prosecuted for this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Bree.
Yeah, I want to just follow up on one of the findings here regarding, it's number 4. The quarantine and isolation facility contracts did not conform to the requirements set forth in the governor's executive order. So were there actual contracts that were signed to pay out these hotels? And what did you mean by the requirements set forth in the governor's executive order?
Well, the executive order was only for 30 days, and some of them went for as many as 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
They all exceeded the limits. And no, there were no contracts, unfortunately, that were signed. So those really should have been air quotes in that whatever agreements they had were all, most of it was verbal, and they were all purchase orders. And that kind of purchase for purchase orders for $48 million, really?
Ooh.
So we're going to look at that and we'll issue our findings on how we view that from the audit perspective. We just question the cost, and it's not an issue of actionable and whether or not it's going to be anything's going to be done by the AG. It's just question cost.
Okay.
All right.
Clearly, though, you weren't satisfied with the response you got from Adelup. No.
I mean, we even put it in the report. We quoted them. That after we gave them an additional month to respond to us, and the response they asked was a real legalese response. We cannot answer this because you didn't provide us with enough information as to who would the name of the person, and I was like, really? Do you really want me to start naming names and amounts and what I believe? Look, I don't think you want me to do that.
Yeah, we do.
No, no, not from my audit, and you're not going to get it from me on the air either. Enough that we pointed it out. But don't play that legalese with us. It was, if you didn't think that we, to say that it was hearsay that there was a conflict of interest, maybe by the time it came out, there was the whole court action, which documented it. Yeah. But even before that, my auditors somehow were resourceful enough to have gotten a copy of the mortgage. So we knew that there had been a mortgage with the bank, and we wouldn't have put it in the initial draft, and we wouldn't have left it in if we didn't have the mortgage. And it's subsequently been confirmed in fights in court where they were the plaintiffs, and garnishing money. To make that kind of response was just.
Right. Let me just read this response, because this is the Office of the Governor's response, right, to the conflict of interest. References in the draft report to hearsay contained in unidentified media sources is insufficient to provide the Office of the Governor or the employee in question with necessary information to formulate a proper response. Accordingly, the Office of the Governor requests more precise information related to this finding and an opportunity to respond at such time such information is provided.
Ooh, take that, BJ. Ooh, get wrecked. You gonna let them talk to you like that? Wow.
You do.
Right on. But your response to that basically was, yeah,
Come
thanks.
on.
Audit's still the same.
Yes, I mean, we have a copy of the mortgage. We don't, as a practice, we don't name names in our audits. It's just a practice that we have, and they knew, I mean, they should know who we were talking about, but enough.
Enough. Well, happy liberation, BJ.
Yeah.
Thank you for liberating this information for us in this audit.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
And of course, it's Liberation Day. It's finally going to rain.
Yeah, I know, right? Like clockwork. We don't even need to do weather. It's like Liberation Day, up, rain. Got it. Thank you, Public Auditor.
All right.
I'll see you. Hey, quick break, really quick break. We're coming back with the Finogi Coalition. Wow, we're going to squeeze a whole lot of info. They're doing a forum.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Good. That
Okay.
wasn't okay. They're doing a forum. Coming
Sorry,
up.
I'm not like on the spot.